So this is pretty random. So a New York Times article came out basically detailing Kamala Harris and her situation as basically doing a bunch of interviews with Democratic insiders, people who are elites within the Democratic Party, donors, powerful people, strategists. Basically, a bunch of them were questioning Kamala Harris and basically saying that she has not really proven herself as the person to carry the mantle. Obviously, she is the vice president to a very old and frail Joe Biden. So, of course, she is second in the line of succession, not only in terms of if something were to happen to him, but also, who's going to be next after him, right? And so that's always the question, right? Who's going to be after? Usually it's the vice president or someone really close to him. If you don't know, Biden actually tried running in 2016, but he got actually discouraged by the Hillary Clinton people and the Obama people who told him not to run. He ended up, deciding not to run, which I think he probably regrets because he would have been a way better candidate than Hillary. I'm very confident if Joe Biden won in 2016, had won the primary in 2016, there was no chance that Donald Trump could have won. Trump's win seems to be more and more as you look into like political science analysis and academic papers. It's just more so it was a perfect storm. And so, there's this situation now where you have, a bunch of allies coming to defend Kamala Harris. So it says allies defend Harris after critical New York Times piece. This is Vice President Harris's allies rallied around her on Monday in response to a New York Times story in which Democratic officials, many anonymously, questioned her work in office thus far and whether she could be the standard bearer for the party moving forward. The Times reported that, quote, dozens of Democrats in the White House, on Capitol Hill, and around the nation, including some who helped put her on the party's 2020 ticket, said she had not risen to the challenge of proving herself as a future leader of the party, much less the country. The piece included an on-the-record quote from John Morgan, a Democratic fundraiser, in which he suggested Harris's readiness to serve as president would be a major attack line against President Biden in the 2024 election cycle. There's no shortage of people willing to throw shade anonymously, and seemingly no shortage of publications willing to write it up and recycle Beltway gossip, tweeted Kristen Allen, Harris's press secretary, in response to the article. So if you don't know what the Beltway is, it's like you have like the Beltway is like the DC area is what's considered. So it's like inside the Beltway would be like news within DC. Outside the Beltway would be outside of it. It's like the New York Times, I guess, in DC. So those still questioning the VP's role and impact are choosing not to see what is right in front of them, she added. Allies went on to link to roughly a dozen news articles highlighting Harris's work in the administration over the past year, showing how the vice president has led outreach over abortion access after the fall of Roe v. Wade, spoken about efforts to replace lead pipe and water systems, promoted the Biden agenda around the country and abroad, and most recently spoke at the funeral of Tyra Nichols, who died of being beaten by Memphis police last month. Simone Sanders, who previously served as Harris's press secretary and news host at MSNBC, suggested she was facing a fresh set of challenges. She's a historic first. Lots of, things. So there's a bunch of people who are coming out in defense of her because of this article, this big New York Times article that came out. The article kind of came out of nowhere because honestly, Kamala Harris has kind of like disappeared, I would say, at least more so from like the frontline conversation. She doesn't really seem to be like part of the frontline conversation. There's not much attention on her. She's not very popular, I think, statistically speaking, like polling numbers wise. But she just really hasn't been in the news cycle that much about anything, at least from what I've seen, in terms of my perception of things. But there's a bunch of kind of questions to ask here and then answers to them, right? What is the role of the vice president in an administration? Now, the role of the vice president at the founding of the U.S. was basically nothing. I think like the first VP was like John Adams, and he was pissed off. He was George Washington's VP. He's pissed off. He's like, dude, like I don't have anything to do. Like, what do I do? You're basically just there if the president dies. You're just basically like something like just doesn't do anything. But as time has gone on, the VP has gotten more and more roles where the president will say, hey, you deal with this immigration thing. You go do this, you go do that. But even then, it's mostly just a ceremonial role. The vice president doesn't really do all that much. So your expectations on a vice president should be literally like ground floor level because they just don't do that much. Their role is not made to do that much. Even like, the whole electoral college vote counting thing, like it's all just ceremonial. Like they don't get to, unlike a lot of Republicans were trying to say, like they don't get to determine which electoral votes get counted or not. They just are ceremonially reading it. So they don't actually have all that much power. They break ties in the Senate. That's a pretty strong power, I guess. But in terms of what power they have is basically nothing. So it definitely does seem like you could have an argument for like there's some aspects of like higher expectations and attack levels because she is obviously like a minority woman, right? But at the same time, when you are analyzing Kamala Harris, the second kind of question is is she somebody who's fit to carry the mantle of the Democratic Party? And I think it's undoubtedly no. I just don't think she's very like politically savvy. I think she's like very, very like cutthroat and like conniving behind the scenes in terms of like a political maneuvering way. But she just doesn't seem. But that's like more behind the scenes thing, like the way she was able to get her, vice presidency, right, or the way that she's, been able to, work her way up, right. But when it comes to actual political savviness, I just don't think she has it. I don't think she really has any political savvy whatsoever. So I don't think she's somebody who can really carry the mantle. I don't think she has much charisma, if any. She kind of gives like some cringy, like very off-putting, like dismissive vibe. She has that weird dismissive laugh that she does whenever you talk about like poor people or minorities and stuff. Does like weird stuff like that. We've seen the videos of her, supporting, making fun of like the, build more schools, like less prisons, and laughing at the idea of like the Republican guy was the one supporting legalizing recreational marijuana. She was the one laughing. So it's like, I mean, she has a really, really bad history. She, somehow turned into this progressive person after being this really hardcore like prosecutor pretty much. But I just don't think she has the political savvy. Like, for example, Barack Obama has like a lot of political savvy. Elizabeth Warren also doesn't really seem to have a lot of political savvy. I would say like Bernie Sanders is like, I wouldn't really say Bernie really has much political savvy either, honestly. I think his message just resonates more with people. In fact, you can even say that he has like actually not as much political savvy. He didn't really seem to have like as much as he should have at the very least. So, political savvy is usually with someone like a Bill Clinton or Barack Obama. You have to be like a combination of both like manipulative and you just have to have it too. You can't just be manipulative. Like Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris are both very manipulative, but they just don't have the political savvy to run campaigns the way a Barack Obama or Bill Clinton do, right? They're both manipulative and they just have that. They just have that factor. I seriously don't see Kamala Harris being the one. However, what we've seen with Joe Biden, I don't think any of us would have thought that Joe Biden would have been the one to carry the mantle either. And Joe Biden has benefited from 4 years of Donald Trump, right? You have like this blubbering idiot. And the more I sort of read and analyze kind of like presidential history of the United States, the American people are just schizophrenic, basically. Their choices of president are just ramblings between diametrically opposed schizophrenic decisions. So you go from Bill Clinton, like insanely smart, incredibly calculated, intelligent, to he's not actually dumb. Like George W. Bush isn't actually dumb, he's actually really smart. But the supposed dumb guy, right? He ran as the dumb guy who's like the chill guy who's not super calculated. And then you have, let's go with the first black guy. And then, let's go with the super racist white guy. It's like, damn, dude. Like, this is just, and then you go from this big, annoying, blustering guy to the guy who's hiding in the basement. In political science now, it's being called the basement strategy. And it worked really well. The Biden basement strategy has worked really well. So, a lot of politicians' success isn't just candidate based, but also just circumstance based. So who is she running against? Who's her opponent? What's the general feeling, right? You generally have like a pendulum swinging. So if a Democrat wins 2 terms, usually it's going to be a Republican, and so those are the kinds of things that matter. And so it's you can't expect Kamala Harris to be doing like a bunch of stuff. I think a lot of people are expecting her to do that. Again, I think that also comes from there is like this weird like expectation that's put on anybody who's like a minority or like somebody like that. There's always like heightened, for some reason there's heightened expectations of what they do than like their peers and stuff. And so you wouldn't even hear that much about Joe Biden, for example. And it's just like, that's interesting, right? Very interesting. But I'm telling you, from a political science perspective, like the VP, now it has more power. At the founding, it had basically 0, but now it has more. But even now, it's like it gets delegated. Like they get delegated some power, but they're not some like crazy. Like they just don't have that much power, right? They are delegated some authority from the president and like responsibilities and stuff, though. And so there has been some problems going on in her office and stuff like that. But is she the person who I think is going to carry the mantle? Hell no, I don't think so. I don't think she has it. I just don't. I think she's more of a Hillary Clinton, where Hillary sucks at campaigning, but she's like really, really smart, very manipulative, and really good at like behind the scenes. Think about how she was able to bring down the Democratic field to basically just her and like some randoms. It was just her versus random. She was able to basically knife out any potential serious challenge. And then the following one, it was like, 16, 17 people. The Republican primary 2016 was like 16, 17. She was able to successfully get Biden not to run. So she's really, really good at that. But she's self-admitted, like, she's like, yeah, I'm just not that good at like campaigning, coming up with slogans. She's not good at that kind of stuff. I think Kamala Harris, I believe, is the same. I think she's really, really skilled at like the behind-the-scenes political maneuvering, but she's not that good when it comes to public political maneuvering. And so to me, it seems like maybe more like a kind of maybe a I don't want to say a Ted Kennedy, because Ted Kennedy was more so like a legislative guy. He was more good at like that when it came to legislation, but she's kind of more just able to get power through that kind of like knifing kind of thing, right? So that kind of like super public politics, I just don't think is going to work for. Just like it didn't work for Hillary Clinton. Whereas like a Bill or a Obama, they're going to be able to do the public one because they're very charismatic and able to do that. And I just think she doesn't have it. But let me know your thoughts down below.